Hello everybody, this is Christodoulou. Welcome to the Seekers of the Storm album commentary. Nice. So, for those of you who have heard these commentaries before, this time around I'm gonna do things a little bit differently. Instead of just playing the music and talking over it, picking up little details while the track plays, I'm going to actually do a bit of montage and play you all the references and things I'm talking about so that we get a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on. I did a couple of test runs with the soundtrack trying to record this, and I just had more info that I could squeeze into the length of each track, so I just wanted to be a bit more comfortable and don't have to rush things. I don't have to edit things and make it, like too fast and like a huge info dump or anything. Just be casual and have the space to elaborate when needed. Alright, so we're kicking things off with the first track, a tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning heard. The title comes from a Shakespeare play, The Tempest. For this soundtrack, because of its title, Seekers of the Storm, I was trying to find titles that would expand on the idea of the rain and water and the weather that is the motive of all the other soundtracks. And it's something that's also reflected in the music itself. The title is actually the stage directions from Act 1, Scene 1, so pretty much the first thing you see when you start reading the play. So this track kicks things off with this really heavy riff using the 7th-string guitar, and this is kind of a statement for me placing this track opening the album, because the 7th string is a brand new element for the Risk of Rain soundtrack. We haven't heard it before. It really adds this heavy, oomphy sound. For those of you who don't know, guitars usually have 6 strings. The lowest one is an E. So the 7th string has an additional string below the E, and it is a B, so a 4th lower. And it gives you the opportunity to play deeper and, heavier riffs and stuff. And because I'm using the 7th string, actually a lot of the pieces are written in the key of B. And speaking of guitars, we have the first appearance of George Karayiannis. He's the amazing guitarist that I found and has played all the solos in the album. I'm gonna be talking about George a lot because he has some really brilliant solos throughout the album. In this solo, he begins really melodically and then kind of evolves into this more technical playing, which really shines. And he's a guitarist that can combine those two elements really elegantly and really smoothly. Even when he goes like deeply technical, he's still very musical. And this is something that I loved instantly, and that's one of the main reasons that I got him to play the solos. So this piece is actually in 5. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this part is in halftime, let's say. We break into halftime. And this is actually combining 2 pieces from the original Risk of Rain. The chord progression comes from the titular track. I've sampled the synth pads, stretched them a little bit, and fit them into the piece to create this chord progression. And the drum beat comes from Dew Point, which is also a piece in 5. So I copied what's going on in the drums in Dew Point and adapted it into this one. So let's talk a little bit about the main ostinato of the piece, which, if you pay attention, oscillates or bounces back and forth between major and minor. Minor, major, minor, major. And listen to this. Minor, major. So, an idea that came to me quite early on about this album was that it's going to be like a one big suite of songs that will be interconnected and sort of maybe perhaps even non-ending, kind of one segues into the other one. This is an idea that I eventually abandoned as far as, applying in total for the album, but it resulted in two things. One thing was the three-part suite, the Maṇi Padme Hūṃ suite, and the other thing was that I ended up with a couple of pairs. The first pair is this one, a tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning heard, with the last track, which is called It Can't Rain All the Time. Obviously, we'll get to that later, but as you can see, they're based on the same ostinato and the same idea of this oscillation, this bounce between the major and the minor. And this is also part of the reason that they are placed in the beginning and the end of the album, because it creates this idea of coming full circle, the matching material, motific material, which is an idea that I really, really like and use it all the time. And let me share some calendar info about the track. This is actually the last idea that I started working on. This is the 8th track that I started working on, despite being the first one in the album. It was started on February 8th, 2024. The 6th and final version of it was on April 5, 2024. The final mix, which was mix 6, happened on May 16, which is the date I finalized most of my mixes, with some exceptions. And then the final master happened on May 16th, and that's for all of the tracks actually. And that was the 15th pass. Not for this track in particular, but for all of them. I would do checks and checks and checks and checks until everything was exactly like I wanted it. Now, these dates do not coincide with when the track went into the game. I'm doing my final version. I have my mix and master chain ready. I produced the in-game version, so to speak, which is slightly different because it also loops differently and all that stuff. And then I'm doing final mix and master for the album, which has some finer details. For example, proper balancing and loudness for streaming services, vinyl versions. Obviously, sequencing comes into play, and then, one track leads into the next one, and all that stuff that you need to take care of to create a proper album. So, we're moving on to Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 1. Now, you need to pay attention for this one because it's really tricky. Now, this is Part 1, but it's actually the third piece that I started working on, both in terms of the suite and also in terms of the entire soundtrack. So I started working on Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 3, Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 2, and then Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 1. Obviously, when I started working on those, I didn't know the order that they're going to appear in the album and the order they're going to be in the suite. But the composition order is 3, 2, 1. And speaking of order, let's check the dates also. This started quite early on October 18th of 2023. Final version, which is version 7, was committed on February 14, 2024, so that's Valentine's Day. So that's why it's so lovely. The mix, which is mix number 6, is done on May 16, 2024, and the final master on June 22, 2024, so the same as the previous one. Just for the record, the Prime Meridian snippet was exported together with the final version on February 14th, and so were the 3 tiers that went into the final boss fight. So, I want to take you a little bit through the composition and focus on the main ostinato, which is also part of the riff, but it's the opening of the track and sort of the foundation of the piece. And in fact, this idea comes from Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 3. It's exactly the same, as you can see. And in fact, this synth part actually comes from the guitar that will come immediately after this, which happens to be the very first idea, the very first thing that I started writing when I started developing the soundtrack. And it's this little thing right here. Doo-dum, 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 doo-dum. So this guitar part consists of a melody and a counterpoint. The counterpoint is the riff that we've been talking about, and the melody is from another piece from Survivors of the Void, which is called The Placid Island of Ignorance. So it is this melody together with this new counterpoint that create the foundation for Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 3, which was the first thing that was written, and then bounced into Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 1. And here's the melody, again in all its glory. Now this was a melody that I really wanted to revisit. I had mentioned that already back in the Survivors commentary. I didn't really think that it would eventually become so prominent in Seekers, but I just liked it so much, so I thought, okay, what the heck, let's just keep using it, keep finding variations of it. And it just became so integrated with the soundtrack. A lot of people ask me if this is thematically tied or has some lore implications, but that's not the case. I always say that this is the music of the world and not particular events or characters. When it comes to themes, I'm more concerned with top-level ideas. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the instrumentation of this soundtrack. So here we get to hear a little bit of the Indian influence, so the sitar and the tambura, which are prominent throughout the soundtrack. These are instruments that have existed already since Risk of Rain 1, but here they become a little bit more part of the color of the soundtrack throughout, instead of just being, you know, little brushes here and there. Now the reason behind this is that when I initially started getting concept art from Gearbox about the expansion, they had this strong influence from Indian and Mesoamerican cultures. So Indian culture, that's where the sitar and the tambura comes from. And Mesoamerican culture, that's where a lot of the flutes that you will hear in the soundtrack come from. Sometimes I use the charango. It's a little bit subdued and stuff, but there are some influences taken from both of these cultures. Now, another thing that is part of the suite is the 13. This little solo, if we count the meter, it's actually a 7 and 6 additive meter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Now the reason behind the 13 is that another major motif of the suite is the one that we hear on Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 2, and it's this little thingy. So let's count it together. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So this is an idea that existed for a very long time. In fact, almost the beginning of the 2000s. And we used to workshop this 13-16 motif with TRIO AYNAN, which was a trio with Thanasi Moustogiannis and Sergios Acheimastos. Thanasi is the drummer who played on Deadbolt, and Sergios plays the bass. And about 10 years later, I used this motif again to write a piece for my Karnatic music course in the Conservatory of Amsterdam. Karnatic music is the music of South India, and it involves a lot of very complex rhythmic manipulation, as you can see in the score. And by the way, the rendition here is actually a MIDI export directly from Sibelius, so that's why it sounds so horrible. This is not people playing or something that I have actually produced. It's just an export to send to the musicians. Anyway, what really fascinates me is that this little rhythmic idea and motive has stuck around from the beginning of the century, essentially, almost 20 years later, and now found its way into Seekers of the Storm. And I'm really fascinated with this concept of obsession in art. And that's exactly what this idea has been for me, this obsession that has been percolating in my head and kind of building and just asking me to reuse it and bring it to the surface again. And that's what this entire suite really represents for me, this manifestation of this obsession. And we'll talk about this again when part 2 comes in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this solo. If you pay close attention to what's going on here, I mean, besides all the madness and like speed runs and all that stuff, my pitch bend is tweaked a little bit here. So the upper range, instead of doing 2 semitones up and 2 semitones down, the upper range is actually 3 semitones. So once in a blue moon during the solo, you will hear these long bends into one and stuff like that. And also sometimes there's one. I have the ability to use my pitch bend almost as if I'm playing a fretless instrument, because I can land in either of these 3 semitones. And this is something that I have said again, I think, in some commentary, but I want to point out to all keyboard players that you should practice solos with different pitch bend ranges, because it puts you in a different mindset and it unlocks different techniques of playing. So just experiment with that. It's super fun. And I'm repeating this section here just to point out that the 13 motive makes a final appearance, both rhythmically and melodically. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 1. And one last hurrah of the original motive that started it all. So, moving on to Yane No Mori. Apologies to any Japanese listeners for my accent. I obviously don't speak Japanese. This title comes from a haiku that, roughly translated, reads, "Spring rain running down a wasp's nest from a roof that leaks." A roof that leaks, that's Yane No Mori. So the reason for this Japanese title is that initially I had this idea, again with a grouping of tracks and making these into a long suite and interconnected and all that stuff. I had this idea that I will have 3 pieces that will be titled after the 3 stanzas of a haiku. And then, reading the titles would create the haiku. This was again abandoned because I didn't find the proper haiku or the proper tracks to fit the stanzas into titles and stuff, but this one sort of stayed. I liked it because it evokes, the rain, which is like the basic motive of my titles for Risk of Rain. So yeah, that's why it is. And for some reason, out of all the pieces, this one felt the more Japanese. In fact, actually, initially, there's a flute in the background of this melody, together with the mini moog that plays here, that was on its own. It would first play the melody on its own, and then the lead synth would come and they would double. But I later on scrapped that and moved it into doing harmony for the lead melody, for reasons purely of production. I just didn't like the sound that much. But it was a flute that was reminiscent of a shakuhachi or something like that. So I guess, I don't know if that came because I had the Japanese title in mind in the back of my head that maybe I will use it somewhere, or because I had that flute, the Japanese title just clicked. I honestly don't remember because it's so long ago. It's more than a year that this, machinations took place. Anyway, so this piece actually is the one that, and this is going to surprise some people, is the one that if I had the chance, if I had the option, and I had the time to write more music for the soundtrack, I would scrap this. Not because it's bad, but I just don't see how it fits with the rest of the music. For me, somehow feels a bit off. It's not exactly in the progressive vein. It's very, very, very like 70s rock inspired, has the Pink Floyd feeling, has like the hard rock production style with the phasers and the drums and all that stuff, and this very, very grungy rock guitar solo. And I just couldn't, like, I struggle a lot with the placing in the soundtrack. I don't know. Obviously, I didn't scrap it because it exists in the soundtrack, but if I had the time to write a little bit more music, I would perhaps not use it, or I don't know. You know, I really like the piece, it just doesn't glue with the rest of them for me. And I'm aware that this is a minority opinion because there are a lot of people who love it. Despite all that, this solo by George is so good. It evokes this truly like heartfelt hard rock feeling. It has the Gilmour vibes with the double bends. It's just so nice. And actually, of all the solos that George sent to me, this is the only one that initially I told him, do another pass, because the original one that he had sent was too clinical. It was not bad, but it was too technical and too beautiful. And I told him, do another pass in which I want to hear your struggle. I don't want to hear a safe solo. I don't want to hear a guitarist who is really comfortable doing his thing. I want to hear a guitarist who's like at the edge of his abilities, and you know, and he's really struggling, and there's feeling coming out of the strings. And needless to say, he delivered like so amazingly. Some other stuff that I can point out about this track: the dew point motif comes here. This is actually not a sample, but it's replayed using the original pads from back then. Now, if you listen to your right speaker right now, you will hear a plucked instrument that sort of replies to the main theme. And I've used a koto sample for this one, again to evoke this sort of Japanese setting, so to speak. Now let's listen to the main melody here. Let's keep this in mind. And let's take a listen to this part from Tlālōcān. Again, it's the same thing, right? I was talking about pairs, so Yane No Mori is the pair with Tlālōcān, the level track essentially and the boss track. And one last thing before we go into Tlālōcān: the beginning and middle section and end section of Yane No Mori has this sort of soundscape with this pulsing. And this sound is made out of two things. One is the laundry machine that we have here in the house, which I sampled and tweaked and stretched to make it fit into the beat of the piece, so it has this kind of repetitive motion. And the other one is the heartbeat of my daughter in her mother's belly. And by the way, there are many other samples of her peppered throughout the soundtrack, the most prominent one being the Song of Life, in which she's singing, and you should not listen to it, of course. But this one is obviously the most poignant one, because it's literally her heartbeat. And by the way, this is a good segue to talk a little bit about the concept of the album, which is birth and rebirth. Before I speak about that, a small parentheses, Survivors of the Void was the Death album. And you can see that, especially in the vinyl art, you literally see a funeral for the ukulele. And that's because I thought that this would be my last album, so it's sort of structured as a requiem, essentially. It's also very grim and dark. So when I got the chance to come back and write a new one, I thought, okay, this is a rebirth. This is a rising again. And in fact, I was so happy that the lore of the game supported this. What with, the birth of the false sun, like the statue given life, the Lemurian eggs, and I was really happy to take advantage of this. And the timing that had to do with the birth of my daughter, I really felt that this is a great opportunity to sort of do something about. There are many clues about, this is an album that is dedicated to my daughter, and there are clues all over the album about that. But it's also made to be sort of a little bit of, I don't know if I call it a celebration, because it's not happy per se, but it's very energetic. It has this power, that is missing from Survivors of the Void. So yeah, that's because I felt that, okay, let's go out with a bang, instead of a requiem after all. So this piece, Tlālōcān, is a rebirth of sorts, in the sense that it is a remake of Double Fucking Rainbow. And why this is a remake of Double Fucking Rainbow is because I didn't have time to write an original piece. I mean, there's a lot of original ideas in this, but there's also a lot of verbatim parts taken from Double Fucking Rainbow and just dropped into the piece and sort of tweaked into it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the solo of this one, which is the one solo that I sort of did a dirty a little bit on George, because he sent me something and I was like, I need something a little bit more, twisted or weird. So I sort of took his ideas and chopped them up and created sort of a monstrosity, Frankenstein, a little bit of a solo, which kind of works, but I feel a little bit guilty messing up with George's original playthrough, which you can actually hear in his presentation of the solos that he has on YouTube. And I want you to pay a little bit attention to what's going on here, which is the solo ends, we land on our key, our main key, and then dun, dun, 2 steps down and we have our new key, which happens to be the key of the next piece. And in fact, the idea of almost randomly moving 2 steps down is actually part of the harmony of Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 2. What I'm trying to say is that there's no material wasted. I'm trying to take advantage of everything and figure out ways to interweave ideas. But we still have some unfinished business with Tlālōcān, so let's get back to it. Now, let's talk about the title of the piece. It's called Tlālōcān, and it is the domain, the paradise of the rain deity Tlālōc, inspired from the Mesoamerican mythology, which was part of the inspiration for the artists of the game, which is why I was looking into Mesoamerican concepts for the title. This part of the piece, which is actually not in the game, this is what it represents. Like, you go into the fight, you fight, you eventually die, which is truly a part of the loop of the game. And when you die, you go into this paradise, which is a place where the music stands still and time stands still, and musical ideas sort of dwell and float and might come into play at any time. And the bass has this sort of free roaming solo that is just, open and not structured at all. Now let's fill in some calendar information. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but for Yane No Mori I seem to have misplaced my files, my sessions, except for the last one. So I can't really tell exactly when I started it. I can tell you that the final mix was done on May 16, it was the 8th iteration, and then on July 5 there was a fix, probably some little error, and on July 7th I committed the new master because of this fix. And Yane No Mori was the fifth idea that I started developing, and Tlālōcān was the sixth. And it started on January 24. The last version, which is version 7, was done on February 16th, 2024. The final mix, which was mix version 9, was done on June 18th, 2024, so a little bit later than the other ones, about a month later than the other ones. And on June 22 again was the master. By the way, if you're taking note of the dates, you will see that they are very intertwined. There's no such thing as, a track begins and then it ends, and a new one begins and then it ends. In fact, everything is sort of worked in parallel. I will just put down an idea, develop it a little bit, move on to the next one, develop it a little bit, next one, and then those ideas will start, trickling down to the previous tracks, and everything will move into everything and form into this kind of connected vessels with the ideas spilling all over. Now, we are in Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 2, which between this and Part 3, I can never decide which one is my favorite. Essentially, they both are on first place on the podium. They share the first place. I particularly love George's work on these ones. The solos are truly mind-blowing. I just can't stop listening to them. Again, the Placid Island of Ignorance theme. And coming up, the first truly pure jazz moment for the Risk of Rain soundtrack. I asked my brother, who is a great piano keyboard player here in Greece, to play a Rhodes solo, and he sent me a couple of takes, and this is one of them, straight dropped into the mix, no comping, no nothing, and it's so funky and nice. I really love it. I'm having a hard time speaking over it because I just love it so much. If you want to take a listen to some other work from my brother, I have links in the description of his albums in Bandcamp. They're mostly jazz stuff. And now we have this big solo by George, for which we have switched to 7. Well, kind of, so let's count. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 bars of 7 and 1 of 13. And what I really enjoyed about George, he's such a master that I never talked to him about like rhythm and meter and stuff. I just sent him the tracks and I said, look, this is the tempo, so you can sort of, lock it into your DAW and just run with it. And he never asked me like, hey, what's going on here? Like, what is this 11 plus 13 that you're using? Or what is this 7, 7, 7 and 13, 16? He was like, whatever, I'll just play. And what is brilliant about his playing is that he doesn't, sometimes when you're dealing with complex meter, you sort of can hear the players doing the counting in themselves. So the playing all kind of reflects the math that is being calculated into their brains. And with George, I never had that. The playing remains fluid and just incorporates the meter in a beautiful way, remains melodic, remains technical to the proper degree. And it was just such a brilliant thing. And for this particular piece, as well as part 3, I have so many takes. I think I have like 4 different takes for this one and 4 for the other one that I sort of comped into one big solo, but all of them were truly beautiful and almost impossible to choose from. At some point I considered the idea of just dropping them into like alternate mixes or something for Bandcamp or something, but at the end I wanted to commit. I wanted to say, no, this is the piece, this is what we came up for, because if you get into this sort of mentality, eventually you sort of lose yourself into, okay, how many other things can I incorporate that were included at some point but then were taken off for whatever reason, and you get into this very, very weird mindset. Anyway, all I'm saying is George Karayiannis, mind-blowing guitar player, love him to death. I just love what he did for this album, and it wouldn't have been the same without him. Thank you, George. And now let's talk about the other collaborator of the album, Stavros Markonis. So I met Stavros many years ago when he wanted to ask me about the Conservatory of Amsterdam, because I had studied there. He was also considering going, which he actually did end up going. And the thing is, at some point, while working on the soundtrack, I was asked about the next DLC. And I told Gearbox, look guys, as much as I love writing this music, and as much as I love curating the music of this game, I can't do it anymore. I need a little bit of a break. Because it's actually hard writing this kind of music, very intense. And also, my daughter was born, which was like super time consuming. And honestly, with Survivors and then the remastered and then Seekers, I haven't had time to listen to music and rejuvenate, you know, like give chance to new ideas to come through. So I'm like, I'm going to find the next person to do this. And Gearbox even asked me about this. And speaking of Gearbox, I want to dispel something that's been talked about online, that I wasn't given enough time to do this. That's not true. We actually constructed the schedule for the expansion together with Gearbox. We knew the time we had. I told them, look, the maximum amount of music I can squeeze into the schedule is this. It's going to be tight, it's going to be intense, but I'm going to do it. So it wasn't something that was sprung upon me or, you know, like a surprise, or I was forced into it or anything like that. That riff though. So I'm thinking about people to, you know, take the reins of the music, and suddenly I'm like, wait a minute. Stavros is a person I know personally. He actually even lives nearby. We can chat. I know that he can do this because he's also in a band, Playgrounded. You should check them out. That sort of writes music in this vein, more or less. And it will be great because I have a direct line with him. We can communicate easier because we're friends. So he was the perfect person for the job. I sent him a text and I was like, how do you feel about going into video game work? He was doing mostly film stuff. He was like, I was actually considering this the other day. And I'm like, okay, let's meet with Gearbox right now. So we arranged a meeting, we talked with him, and then I said, instead of me doing this and then suddenly on the next DLC a new composer pops up, why don't we get Stavros do something for this game so we can sort of ease in the transition? And that way we also have one more track for the DLC. And that's essentially what happened. Stavros wrote the track, I sent him a template of a lot of my sounds. Don't use whatever you want, don't use whatever you don't want. Send it to me, I co-produced it in the sense that I added some Risk of Rain brushes over it. I didn't change the music or anything, that's all Stavros. We mixed it, we dropped it in the game, and the rest is history. And the new DLC, I know it because I have all the music in my hard drive, will have a great soundtrack, and I'm super, super happy that we managed to arrange this very smooth transition, frictionless transition, because people are already acquainted with Stavros, they know that this piece that he sent is like a banger. So everything worked out really great, and I'm super happy about it. Oh, and by the way, the track is called Should Build the Man a Statue, and I'm the Man. So moving on to Forgot the Cry of Gulls, and the title comes from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, in fact the fourth part of this very long poem, which is actually quite short. I mean, the fourth part is short, and it's called Death by Water, so you can see, you know, the connection. You should actually go read that. It's just a few lines that I think fit nicely into the whole theme of both, you know, the title scheme of Risk of Rain 2 and the theme of the game, sort of overall. Anyway, let's talk rhythm. So this is actually an additive or a combo meter, whatever you want to call it, of 11 and 13. But in the drumming, I move from following the 11 and 13 very tightly into going into this 12-8, because 11 and 13, you know, you can split the difference and have two 12s. So essentially there's a lot of mindfuckery going on here. And in this part we have the Indian influences come back with the guitar and the sitar doing this doubled line, and the Mesoamerican influences represented by this pan flute run. And of course the actual Cry of Gulls are appearing. I'm using a guitar that has this pickup that's called a sustainer, and it works almost like an ebow. Not almost, actually, it works exactly like an ebow. Instead of picking up the actual note that you're fretting, it enhances a specific harmonic depending on the setting that you put on the sustainer. So we get this very lush, high register sound that sort of swells over the music. Okay, calendar stuff. Forgot the Cry of Gulls. Started January 10th. Finished version 5 on February 13. Mix 17 done on July 22. And master on June 22. Now, about the solo that's about to come in. It's the last one that George sent. And I asked him at the very last minute, because originally I was going to do a keyboard solo, but I thought it really fits here to have a guitar solo. And I just gave him one single direction. I told him, please don't do any Hijaz stuff. And Hijaz, if you don't know, is this, you know, this sort of Arabian or whatever thing that would, in theory, fit the track, but I didn't want to go into that. I told him, stay modern, do a lot of jumps like fourths and stuff. And he sent me this great solo, and it was actually, I asked him on a Friday, and I had to send the track on Monday or something like that, a very tight deadline. So he had to work over the weekend, and he sent me the stuff, which is like great call and response type solo, and was dropped into the track, and yeah, the rest is history. And we're moving into Maṇi Padme Hūṃ Part 3. Oh, by the way, forgot the Cry of Gulls is the fourth piece I started working on for the soundtrack, and this one is the first one. I started on, on August 8th, which is exactly 2 years to the date I'm recording this. It's going to be posted like a couple of days later, but I'm recording this on August 8th. That's a funny coincidence. Version 10 was finished on February 12th. Mix 10 was done on June 18, and June 22 was the master. So this piece is written in 7/4, and the reason for that being in 7/4, which is like a slow 7, so to speak, and the reason for 7/4 actually being quite prominent in the album in general is because my daughter was born on April 7th, so 7/4. Now, this little synth part that comes here is actually taken from a piece from Survivors of the Void called They Might As Well Be Dead. So you see how all these ideas keep, coming back and repurposed and used in different ways. Now, about the 7 here, I want to dispel a little bit of confusion about where the beat is. So we're going to count it together because I'm actually displacing the 1 and kind of accenting the 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. Again, the 2 is always accented. Anyway, if you want to keep track of the 7th, you can listen to the charango, the titin, titin, this little string instrument on the side. Because the solo on the fretless bass here does not adhere to the meter, so it's kind of free. A fretless bass is essentially a bass that doesn't have the little metal thingies locking your strings into specific lengths, so you can move freely, slide into the notes. I really like those two harmonic bends, which I've done on the fretless by doing artificial harmonics, if you're familiar, where I'm touching somewhere on the fretboard and then I'm doing the harmonic by slightly touching on the string a fourth above, which produces a harmonic 2 octaves above. All right, and now we're gearing up into the most ecstatic moment of the soundtrack for me. I asked George about a solo that would be spiritual and have a sense of worship and just be practically a religious experience. My references were pieces like, I don't know, For the Love of God by Steve Vai, for example. Things like that. I asked him to use the wah because I wanted this to be talking, to be speaking to us. He sent me, I think, 3 or 4 different takes. Initially, this was even a little bit longer, and George asked me, he was like, look, I can't maintain this energy for that long. It's impossible, because this is so high energy and so intense that I just can't hold for more. I can't find more stuff to give. So I cut one verse, let's say, from the solo, but it doesn't matter because everything that needs to be there is there. And whenever I listen to this solo, first of all, I really can't believe that we've got this. It's so amazing. But to me, whenever I listen to this, when it comes to the end of it, I always feel like I'm out of breath. I feel like, what the fuck has happened? Like, what was this thing? It's just such an amazing guitar playing. There's so much feeling into it. There's so much technique into it, supporting this feeling. I don't know. It's just too good. I shouldn't speak over it. It's practically sacrilegious to be speaking over this solo. Sometimes I feel a little bit guilty because I'm genuinely a fan of my music. But when it comes to pieces like this one, I'm like, I don't have this guilt, because all I did was provide a canvas for a person, and then they came in and made it theirs and uplifted it to heights that I could even imagine. I mean, this is... In my wildest fantasies, I couldn't have thought that we would get to this point. So I'm truly thankful. And there is Padme. So I had this one person who was like, hey, I don't appreciate you breaking the flow of the album by using the voice of a baby. I'm putting this album on and I want to enjoy it, and I don't want to have interruptions. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? First of all, it's my album and I do whatever the fuck I want. And second of all, it's not an interruption. It's very carefully placed there for specific reasons. We already talked about the concept of the album, of rebirth and all that stuff. And what more poignant to signify this than the voice of a baby? But it's also there because there's a very, very clean break in style. All the other pieces are part of the, Risk of Rain 2 compendium, so to speak. And this one suddenly is a strong throwback to Risk of Rain 1 and uses a lot of its sounds and palettes. I'll come back to this, just small parenthesis, to note this guitar that is playing right now, which is taken from Dream Theater's Pull Me Under. I can't play a sample of the piece, but search for Pull Me Under by Dream Theater, listen to the guitar, and you will know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's my favorite band, what can I say? Anyway, back to the throwback aspect of all this. Now, this time around, I was quite certain that this is the last thing that I'm writing for Risk of Rain. I mean, I don't know about the future, but I'm talking about, this period, okay? So I was like, let me do something that truly puts this into perspective and closes the cycle. And I decided that I'm going to write a piece that, with just a couple of exceptions, in fact, maybe just some flutes that play, everything else could have been from the Risk of Rain 1 album. And this is sort of my way of saying, you know, look how far we've come, you know, look back to where we started from. And this is also reflected in the title of the piece, which is It Can't Rain All the Time. And this is a title that, speaking of obsession, has been in my notebooks for such a long time. I mean, I have little digital notebooks that I have a lot of titles, like potential candidates for titles for Risk of Rain pieces. And just after we wrapped Risk of Rain 1, this was the very first title that I put down. I was like, a day will come that I will get to use this in a meaningful way. And I've held on to it. I didn't use it for Risk of Rain 2, didn't use it for Survivors, I didn't use it for the remaster, and it was time. The title comes from a movie called The Crow from 1990, which in turn shows you again another level of this obsession. It's a quote from a movie from the 90s that it just stuck in my head. I mean, obsessions is just another theme, I think, of this album, and my life in general, maybe. Anyway, so this piece, essentially, it's structured as there's this motif exposed, and then a little melody comes in, which is the melody from Placid Island of Ignorance, and then a solo plays with the lead sound of Risk of Rain, and this is all very somber and sort of calm. It doesn't go into like the great build-ups and great heights or anything. And the solo fades with even its distortion is being taken away as it fades into the lower register. And we just wrap it up. This was the 7th idea put down for this album. Started on February 3rd, and version 3 finished just on February 11, but mix 16 took place on June 22, the same day that the master was committed, and I know why this happened. I mean, I was not mixing all that time, obviously, but I did some really, really last-minute changes, and it was that I sampled the snare drum from Pull Me Under and layered it in. I mean, this is such a fine detail, and it doesn't even matter, because it's not that you hear that snare drum, it's just one of the many layers of the snare drum you hear in the piece. But I still, for some reason, wanted to do it again, obsession. And yeah, we have the final thing that you hear on the album is the Risk of Rain motive, this da-dum-da-dum, da-dum-da-dum. And it's finally time to wrap things up. I want to say thank you if you've listened all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the insight into the music. If you want to know more, just leave a comment and I'll be happy to reply. But most of all, I want to say thank you for sticking with me through all these years, ever since 2013 when this journey started. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your love for this music with me. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the support. It has been a huge privilege going on this journey with you. So, thank you.